Hello, I'm just going to quickly show you my 2008 Haynes manual model. It's a 4-stroke engine, 4-stroke, 4-cylinder, inline petrol engine. Alright, I'll just quickly show you this. So it's based on an old designer engine. Although it was made in 2008, it uses, it's depicting carburetors, distributor, all that's obsolete now. We don't use that anymore. Petrol engines, they use electronic engine management and injection systems. I'll show you as best I can. Oops. I'll give you a better overview of that in the next clip, but I'll just go through how it works basically, just in a nutshell, as best as I could explain it anyway. The front, you've got your fan belt, fan water pump, and you've got at the bottom there the crankshaft pulley, auxiliary pulley. That's used as an elastic band for that. The belt behind that, the green toothed belt behind that, is a timing belt. That drives the camshaft in this case from the crank. The crankshaft drives the camshaft via the toothed timing belt. Like I say, this is an old design of engine that uses the carburetor, which is the bit at the front. That mixes the air and petrol for the air fuel mix. The distributor is what is depicted here as lights. That's the spark plugs on the real engine. That's the firing order, is what you're seeing. The firing order, which piston is to ignite that cylinder to ignite the fuel air mixture, is dependent on the position of the piston. Top dead centre on its power stroke, that will be ready for its spark plug to throw the piston down. The opposing piston on the opposite side will be on its the exhaust stroke to get rid of the exhaust gases through the exhaust valve. The other two pistons, one will be compressing, the other will be just ready to do its power stroke. So you've got induction and intake, sucks the air and fuel in at the bottom dead centre. Then the piston goes up to top dead centre, compresses the fuel air mixture, spark plug ignites, that's your power stroke, throws the piston back down, pushing the crankshaft, which turns the crankshaft. And then on the next stroke, the fourth stroke, the piston goes up again to expel the exhaust gases out of the outlet manifold or exhaust manifold, down to the downpipe, through the silencers, not the tailpipe. As I say on it, this is an old design. If you went back in time, you would find a lot of cars from the 70s and 80s were made with distributors and carburetors. But nowadays, most of them are engine management and injection system. The motor here is where the transmission would be on a real engine, which would connect up to the flywheel, and that takes the power from the engine via the clutch through the transmission and then to the road wheels via drive shafts or prop shafts, depending on the configuration of where the engine's fitted in the vehicle. If it's a transverse front engine mounted, then it'll be a transaxle more likely, where the final drive or differential gearbox will be at the bottom. You have a drive shaft going that way to one wheel and the drive shaft going the opposite way to the other wheel, the opposite front wheel. You can have four-wheel drives, you can have a rear-wheel drive if it's longitudinal engine, but it's sitting that way, lengthways, so the front of the engine's at the front of the car, sitting long ways, then the transmission will be at the back, and then you'll have a prop shaft that will come out to the drive axle at the rear, if it's like that. That's just an example anyway. This engine's very basic knowledge, just gives you a very basic understanding of how an engine works. On an engine you've got a lot of other things as well. On there for instance you would have an alternator that would be driven off the fan belt. Well, in a lot of cases it's just called the alternator belt, because a lot of cars, as I say, this, if you went back in time, this would be common to have belt driven fan, but a lot of modern cars now have the electric driven fans at the front of the radiator. And then this would just be the auxiliary belt that drives the alternator, and of course, being modern cars nowadays, the air conditioning compressor as well. And then you've got power steering pumps as well. That's another thing that could be driven off the auxiliary belt. As I say, the green toothed belt there is the timing belt that drives the camshaft. It operates in this case it's the rocker arms, rocker shaft at the top, which is activated by you've got the camshaft below it, which has got lobes on it. As the camshaft turns, the lobes, the eccentric off-centred lobes will push up and down on the rockers, which will then, through the mechanisms, open and close the spring-loaded valves, which basically allows the fuel air mixture to enter the cylinder on the induction stroke and to close and seal with a gas-tight seal for the compression stroke. And then the ignition stroke, piston goes down after it's been ignited by the spark plug. That's your power stroke. And then all the exhaust gases that are in there need to escape. So the exhaust valve's now time. It's now time for the exhaust valve to open. So all the timing's controlled by the setup of the engine. The timing belt drives it, keeps everything in time. Then the exhaust gases go through the exhaust valve, out through the exhaust port, and then out of the exhaust manifold to be filtered if it's catalytic converter and silenced. As I say, you wouldn't get a catalytic converter on this engine. This is an old design of engine. Although this Haynes manual made this in 2000, well, I got this in 2008. I bought this up from all the parts from the magazine, the Haynes manual magazine. I got all the bits and assembled it myself. But it does depict an old engine. You couldn't have a catalytic converter on this type of engine because of the carburetor and the distributor. It's just not accurate enough for the exact measurements required for the emissions with catalytic converter cars. But like I say, if you go back in time, you would find this was common because they weren't as strict with the emissions back in, say, the 70s and 80s. I think it was mandatory in Britain around about 1992. I think that's when manufacturers needed to start building cars with catalytic converters, and that's when they started phasing out the distributor and carburetor. Carburetor just mixes, it sucks the air that's sucked in due to the vacuum and the piston going down. The piston goes down in its cylinder bowl, creates a vacuum. That vacuum then allows the atmospheric pressure, 14 something pounds per square inch, whatever it is. That then obviously the air pressure is going to fill up the cylinder. It gets filtered first. The air comes through the air filter. In this case, it'll probably sit somewhere, the top of their carburetor or somewhere else, and it'll go through chunking. So it will get sucked through the air filter. The air will get sucked through the air filter, filtered, cleaned through the inlet valve at the correct time. Well, it goes through the carburetor first, where it'll meet and mix with the petrol for the correct ratio, the air to fuel ratio. Then it goes into the combustion chamber where you get burnt. The engine comprises of a lot of other things as well. You've got the dipstick here to check the oil, for the oil stored at the sump, or the oil reservoir, for the coolant, the oil lubricant. That gets pumped around the engine through drillings and the con rods, through the pistons, out through the piston control rings, lubricates the piston and the cylinder wall. You need to have piston rings for the expansion, thermal expansions. The metal contraction expands the temperature, so you need to have a means of compensating for that. Piston rings are there for that. They're spring-loaded piston rings. It allows for wear as well as the pistons going down in the cylinder bore. Eventually the pistons and cylinder bore wears out. Piston rings will expand through the spring-loaded rings, will compensate that to keep a gas-tight seal for when the piston goes up in the compression stroke, to keep the compression air mixture, the fuel air mixture compressed, keep it all within the cylinder. The bottom half of the engine crankshaft sits there. Connecting rods are fitted to the crankshaft by the big end bearings, which is at the bottom. Big end bearings are there. Small end bearings, or small ends, is where the con rod is connected to the piston. The piston's at the other end of the con rod, and it uses small, like gudgeon pins, to allow it to connect and to allow it to move as well. As I say, it's a very basic explanation. So the top of the engine, cylinder head, you got the rocker cover, you got a cylinder head, and you got a cylinder head gasket that seals the oil and coolant within the block. You got the cylinder block, usually cast iron, or certainly the old engines were. I think nowadays it's probably cast aluminium for lightness. Then you've got the crankcase at the bottom, and then you've got the oil pan, that's your oil, basically that's your oil reservoir. Top the oil up through the oil filler hole, and it drains down through the engine into the oil container at the bottom. The oil pump is driven off the crankshaft, which produces oil flow. That circulates the oil round through the engine, keeps the engine lubricated, and it keeps the engine cool. There's detergents and all sorts of chemicals added to the engine oil to keep to prevent corrosion, to stop sludge build up, to keep the engine cool as well, but mainly lubricated. The oil could also act for hydraulic tappets. We've got hydraulic self-adjusting tappets in the top half of the engine to allow for clearances with the bucket type tappets. But the camshaft meets the top of the valve stem. You know, there's the tappets that compensates for thermal wear and tear, thermal expansion as well. They could be hydraulically adjusted, so you need to have hydraulics for that as well. Keeps them quiet, keeps it lubricated as well. The oil goes through the engine. Once it comes through the engine, it goes to a filter. The filter could be a cartridge type filter. It might look like something, similar shape to that. There's a bit at the bottom where you would screw it on. You replace it on regularly. You just unscrew the filter, replace it, change the engine oil, because the filter catches all the. That's just to give you an idea of it. It looks like a similar shape. You got all different types, but it fits somewhere on the engine anyway, depending on the design of the engine, and it just catches all the rubbish that's gathered through the byproducts of the combustion, all the wear and tear of the engine, because through the miles, thousands of miles and years, bits of microscopic metal or components will end up in the oil galleries. All that will go around the engine, but it needs to get cleaned out. You catch that through the filter to keep the oil clean, basically. And you have some engines have oil coolers as well to keep the oil at the optimum working oil temperature. Like turbochargers on engines, the oil will get very hot there, and you've got very fine tolerances with these engines because of the fine, they're much more complex. As I say, this is just a very basic understanding, a very basic engine. It's a 4-cylinder inline 4-stroke engine. So like I say, the distributor there, that's what's responsible for the timing of the spark plugs. The crankshaft is responsible for the opening, also it's responsible for the opening and closing of the valves for the inlet and outlet valves. So the auxiliary shafts in here, we've got the auxiliary pulley. As I say, that drives the water pump, which is behind the cooling fan in this instance. And also you could have this driving the alternator or a dynamo if it was a really old car, which would be bolted on the side of the engine and be a pulley on it, and then that would drive that. And you could have air conditioning compressors. They'd probably have more than one belt for that. They'd have a belt for this and the alternator, and then maybe have another belt for the air conditioning and power steering, perhaps, as an example. So that's just a quick overview. Of this engine. So I'll put it down and I'll show you a closer view of this engine. That's the firing order there. It's your cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4. And now you can see the firing order in which the spark plugs are firing it. That's the big end bearings at the bottom, hold the conrod to the crankshaft. And we've got the main bearings as well, which holds the crankshaft to the crankcase, the engine block. And at the top you can see your valves, spring-loaded valves, camshaft with eccentric lobes on them. see the rocket arms at the top. So that's carburetor, inlet manifold, exhaust manifold, outlet manifold, distributor, where the transmission would be. Between the transmission and flywheel you've got a clutch. It's the auxiliary pulley, then you've got the drive pulley for the timing chain, timing belt in this case, water pump, which is belt driven in this case, and the cooling fan which keeps the radiator cool. The coolant gets circulated by a water pump all around the cylinder jackets, cylinder wall jackets to keep the cylinder at the right temperature. Then from there it goes to the heater core for the inside, keep the car warm, the heater core, which is just like a radiator. Then the main radiator. You also have a thermostat that controls how much water goes to the main radiator, so that on a cold day the engine will get up to operating temperature quickly. Then the thermostat will open and allow the coolant to go to the radiator to keep it regulated at the correct temperature. But the heater core will get coolant going to it all the time to keep the heater core at the hot temperature. But you've got controls in the car, the flaps, that will allow air to go past the heater core to keep the car warm, or bypass it to keep the car cool. So it's just getting cool air from outside, or air conditioned air or whatever. So that's just a basic view of this. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.